Ready to bring the juries in?
Yes, Your Honor. Yes.
All right, let's return the juries, please. You can be seated. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let me start as I have each day of the trial. Did anyone have any issue with anyone attempting to speak with them about the case during the break? Anyone see, hear, or read anything about the case during the break? All right, very good. All right, ladies and gentlemen, both the state and the defendants have now rested their cases. The attorneys now will present their final arguments. Please remember that what the attorneys say is not evidence or your instructions on the law. However, do listen closely to their arguments. They are intended to aid you in understanding the case. Each side will have equal time, but the state is entitled to divide this time between an opening argument and a rebuttal argument after the defense has given its closing argument. And there are a couple of different ways this could have been done, given the fact that there are three defendants. But what we've elected to do is the state will give a closing argument, an initial closing argument on the entire case. And then each defendant will have an opportunity to make an argument, and then the state will have an opportunity to give rebuttal after the three defense arguments. Mr. McCourt?
May it please the court, counsel?
Yes, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is not the first time you're going to hear somebody today thank you for doing what you've done. And as a jury, some of you have been here for on and off for the better part of a month. The rest of you for a week and a half. You're going to be here tomorrow again, deliberating. You've heard a lot of evidence. In a very, very short amount of time, tomorrow morning, you all are going to go back into your respective jury rooms and begin to deliberate your verdict. And when you deliberate your verdicts, the state's confident you're going to find that these three men, Laquan Barrow, Gary King, and Michael Eugene Smith, are all guilty of the murder of Benitria Robinson and the attempted murder of the remaining persons. Now, Laquan Barrow went to Cloud 9 that night, works at Checkers. He's there with his girlfriend, Shigeri and Hamilton. He's having a drink. The photo booth, they got their picture taken. Also goes by Quan Sosa. Michael Eugene Smith goes by Gene. He goes to the club that night. He's outside here, shown in the surveillance still, wanting to get back in. Quan and Michael both got in fights with Nathaniel Kendrick on September 13th, 2015 inside the club. Gary Edward King. Gary, Laquan's cousin, Michael's friend. These guys hang out, they associate together. He goes to the club that night. They're all there. His car is there. And then you have Benitria Robinson. There on the right. She was 19, college student, an athlete, attending school on a basketball scholarship. She came back to Ocala for the weekend. Her autopsy revealed no alcohol in her system, no drugs. This young lady simply went out dancing. And then that happened. 21 gunshots fired by these three men in a matter of 4.5 seconds. That's Detective Richard Tuck, as he was there about to perform CPR on Benitria. I've got a pulse. Stay with me. Stay with me. Stay with me. But she didn't. Within a few minutes, she had passed. In And while these men were leaving the scene, they had just done this to her. And while Benitria was sleeping the earth, people started coming forward, like Jarrell Shaw, who you heard from on Friday. I can identify them. And who did he identify? Laquan Barrow, the big one. Gary Smith, the shorter one with golds in his mouth. And Michael Eugene Smith, the tall, thin one with the little fro, wearing orange basketball shorts. Jarrell Shaw came forward minutes after this happened. He comes into court and identifies these three men. These three men are guilty of the murder of Benitria. Now, Mr. Shaw may have been the first to come forward, but other people did. You heard from them. They came forward in the hours that followed, the minutes, the hours, sometimes the days that followed. In the case of Nathaniel Kendrick, it's weeks, because Nathaniel Kendrick was in a coma until the end of October. In some cases, even months or years afterward, like Dee Webster, you got to hear from. Dee told you why she didn't come forward right away. That she was concerned that she was on bond in Orange County, wasn't supposed to be drinking. But the good thing, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, is you got to hear from Dee. And the reason we have trials, the reason why we don't just come into court and read a bunch of things on a piece of paper and let you decide, is because there's a human element to what you do that cannot be replicated anywhere but in a courtroom. You can watch somebody like Dee testify. As you're considering her testimony, and weighing, deciding how much weight to give it in your deliberations, consider how she acted. And think about the things somebody like Dee was saying. Talking about call Benny. As you hear that on the body camera, Dee recounted for you what she was saying in that moment. That she was hysterical, screaming. And we hear it. Dee Webster was there. Now, we're here today because Ms. Robinson is dead. And because 5 other people that day were shot. Now, all of the work that you've done and will continue to do is going to be summarized really in filling out what's going to be for the jury for Mr. Barrow and Mr. Smith, 6 pieces of paper. And for the jury for Mr. King, 5. Those are verdict forms. Now, this is a form that's going to be very much like the verdict form that you all are going to receive. You start up here, it's going to have the count as Benitria Robinson. Now, every jury will have a separate verdict form for that count as to each defendant. So, where it says here, we the jury find as to the defendant, it's going to say that the defendant Laquan Barrow, the defendant Michael Smith, and the defendant Gary King. But rather than go over 18 forms with you, I'm going to try to go over 2. So you have here A, B, C. As to count 1, check only 1. Guilty of second-degree murder, guilty of manslaughter, or not guilty. Now to simplify a little bit, because we have these little boxes in here called interrogatories. We'll talk about those in a moment. Simplify the verdict form a little bit, right? You go from A, B, C with all the other selections down to this. The defendant is guilty of second-degree murder. The defendant is guilty of manslaughter. The defendant is not guilty. So say we all dated this blank date of December 2017. Obviously, if you all believe that any of these men are not guilty, if you find the state has not proven to you any of these counts beyond a reasonable doubt, it's your duty as a jury to acquit them. If you have reasonable doubts as to their guilt, nothing less than an acquittal would be justice. But This is not a case where there is room for reasonable doubt based on all of the evidence that you've heard. Second-degree murder and manslaughter. The judge will instruct you on the law. We're going to talk about it a little bit now, so the first time you hear it is not going to be tomorrow or later today. Second-degree murder has three elements. We talked about elements a little bit in jury selection. Might have compared them to like a bacon, lettuce, and tomato sandwich, right? What are the ingredients of a bacon, lettuce, tomato sandwich? Bread, bacon, lettuce, tomatoes. Kind of a silly example, but it makes the point. For second-degree murder, there are three elements. For manslaughter, there are two. Now, the parties have stipulated, as you heard, Benicio Robinson is dead. We have agreed to that. That element, the judge will tell you, should be considered proven because it is stipulated to. The third element, we're going to go to second-degree murder, because this is really the part of the instruction that will differentiate it from manslaughter. So, the killing of Benicio Robinson was by an act imminently dangerous to another and demonstrating a depraved mind without regard for human life. Well, what is that? It's got two parts. The first part is an act. The definition of an act is very self-explanatory. It's actions or series of actions arising from one purpose. What does it mean for something to be imminently dangerous to another and demonstrating a depraved mind without regard for human life? It has to be an act that a person of ordinary judgment would know is reasonably certain to kill or do serious bodily injury to another. Now, the act we're talking about here is discharging a firearm in the direction where the people who were shot were standing. Into that crowd of people. You saw the Melissa Hall's video. There's a group of people out front. You can see on the video taken from over the door, the number of people run inside. And obviously, we know that these people who were shot were in the area the gunfire was directed to, by virtue of the fact they were shot. So, for Benicio Robinson, is firing a gun in her direction reasonably certain to kill or do serious bodily injury to her? Well, yes. Second, it's done from ill will, hatred, spite, or an evil intent. You all have Melissa Hall's cell phone video. You can hear what Laquan Barrow's saying. His friends there are with him, acting in concert with one another. These shots happen in 4.5 seconds. This is not somebody starts shooting, somebody goes, gets a gun, and decides to join in. This was a planned thing, that they were going to shoot at Mr. Kendrick. Now, the judge will tell you, for second-degree murder, the state does not need to show that there's any intent to kill. You may believe that Mr. Barrow had the intent to murder Mr. Kendrick, but that is not an element of the crime charge, and the state does not need to prove an intent to kill. You may believe Gary King and Michael Smith, they were all there to murder Nathaniel Kendrick. That's fine, but that's not going to be an element in the case. So while that may inform your verdict a little bit, it's not something that needs to be proven. And same with manslaughter. There is no intent to kill requirement for manslaughter. Okay. So, was that act done from ill will, hatred, spite, or evil intent? Well, sure. Michael and, what you heard was inside the club, Maisha gets in a fight with Danielle Kendrick. They're fighting. Okay. And you can see on the video Maisha running around. She's wearing a pair of white leggings, Kiera Scott in his white shirt's trying to hold her back. She's yelling, let her go. She gets loose in front of the Oyster Bar, comes back up the road, tries getting back in the nightclub. Okay. Laquan's mad because he's inside when he went to interfere in the fight, and he went at Danielle Kendrick. That's when Nathaniel Kendrick gets him, and then Laquan first trouble, even though he's a big man, he gets taken down by a much bigger man, fairly hard. Gets put in a chokehold. I think that Mr. Counsel said, there's like a choke lift, and puts him on the ground. He puts Laquan Barrow in his place. And Laquan doesn't like that. Laquan goes outside. After that, Michael Smith, you heard from his own witnesses, from Javon Collins, good friend of his, that Michael Smith was inside the nightclub that night fighting with Nathaniel Kendrick. You can see Michael is angry. Michael is animated. Michael is on the video over that door trying to get back in that nightclub. He's trying to get back in. He's pointing. The security guard's pushing back. He wants to get back in. Why? Because the object of his aggression, Nathaniel Kendrick, is still inside. Nathaniel's not in yet. Laquan is trying to get back into the nightclub. Why? Because Nathaniel Kendrick is still inside. The act of shooting at Nathaniel Kendrick by these men was done with ill will, hatred, spite, or evil intent. proven. And is the act of such nature that it in itself indicates a disregard for human life? Sure. Sure. If you care about life, you're not going to fire into a crowd of people. Third element, proven. Now, coming back with manslaughter here, what you see is the remaining element, really, of second-degree murder, that the death was caused by a criminal act of the defendant, manslaughter, that he intentionally committed an act that caused the death of Demetria Robinson. Those are very, very similar, right? And that, I expect, is where the issue is going to be. But if you find that these defendants are the ones who did the shooting, or principals to the shooting, which we'll talk about in a minute, then they're guilty of both second-degree murder and manslaughter. Right? The judge will tell you, the law is, you return a verdict of guilty for the highest offense proven. The judge will tell you, second-degree murder is the charged offense. Manslaughter is a lesser included offense. Like any time you commit a burglary, you're also committing a trespass. Okay? But if you committed a burglary, you get convicted of burglary, not trespassing. The trespassing is included in the act of burglary. Okay? When you commit a robbery, you're also committing a theft. Okay? You're guilty of robbery, that's the higher offense. And you know the offense is a higher offense because it is higher up on the verdict form. Okay? So when you get to this point, manslaughter, while it is a lawful verdict, is not consistent. Well, it is consistent with the evidence, but second-degree murder, because it's the higher offense, is the appropriate verdict in this case. Now, let's talk about the principal's instruction, because you're going to get the death was caused by the criminal act of, and for Mr. Barrow's instruction, it will say Laquan Barrow. For Mr. Smith, it will say Michael Eugene Smith. For Gary King, it will say Gary Edward King. But under the principal's instruction, if the defendant helps another person commit a crime, like shooting into a crowd, shooting at Nathaniel Kendrick, they are a principal and have to be treated as the other person if you find they had a conscious intent the act be done, meaning they all knew what they were going to be doing and intended that they were going to be shooting at Mr. Kendrick, which, again, you have the volley of gunfire, which you can hear on the body camera. Everybody was ready, everybody was waiting, everybody was prepared to shoot at Mr. Kendrick when he made his appearance, and they did. And they did something which incited, caused, encouraged, assisted, or advised them to actually commit a crime. Okay? So, trying to shoot Mr. Kendrick, 3 people shooting is more likely to shoot him than 1. Okay? So, they are assisting one another in the act of shooting into that crowd. So, because they are principals, they are each treated as if they had done all the things the other people did. So, Laquan Barrow, Michael Smith, and Gary King, because they are principals, are the same person in the eyes of the law, and in your eyes, and in your deliberations. These 3 people are part of one body. And because they're guilty of second-degree murder, you will check on the verdict form that they are guilty of second-degree murder of Demetria Robinson. Now, but your work is not done. At this point, you have to answer what are called interrogatories. That's these parts right here. So the interrogatories are as follows. Okay. First one, was it proven beyond a reasonable doubt that they personally carried or used a firearm? Now, the principal's theory does not apply to this. This is whether they personally, they themselves, not whether an accomplice, but they themselves actually carry or use a firearm. So if you find that Laquan Barrow had a gun in his hand or used it, you would find him guilty of second-degree murder with carrying or using a firearm. Same for Mr. Smith, same for Mr. King. Okay. And there's also these instructions here. Did the state prove during the second-degree murder that they actually possessed a firearm? Have or hold a gun carried about their person during the commission of the crime? That's actual possession. And discharging is shooting the gun. So if you find that they carried or used a firearm, discharged a firearm, and actually possessed a firearm, you will check those boxes. The evidence in this case shows that they all did. Now, if you, based on the facts you've heard, find that, well, maybe one of them didn't actually possess a firearm, but they were a principal in some other fashion, maybe they handed off a gun to somebody, you can find them guilty of second-degree murder, but you do not have to check those interrogatories. That is entirely your call as the jury. As the jury, you decide the facts of the case. So, carrier use, discharge, actually possess. And you will get that for every count of second-degree murder. Now, there's no instruction here, and we'll talk about this in a minute. There's possession, discharge, and there's death or great bodily harm. And we'll talk about that in conjunction with Nathaniel Kendrick and Danielle Kendrick as it relates to Mr. Barrow. Okay? But with Ms. Robinson, I think everybody would agree that while we know the two projectiles that were removed from her by Dr. Levesi at the medical examiner's office, State's Exhibits 7 and 8, we know they were fired from the same gun. We're going to talk about that in a little bit more. But we know they were fired from the gun, but it really, while I think the evidence you'll find does point to one of these gentlemen as having been the one to actually fire the rounds that took her life. So there is not sufficient proof beyond a reasonable doubt to say for certain, beyond a reasonable doubt, that it was one of these gentlemen. Or which of these gentlemen it was. So you have the other option for manslaughter. And I want to talk about this just in case your deliberations happen to take you. Okay. Manslaughter is intentionally committing an act that causes the death of Demetria Robinson. Now, manslaughter is not just simply causing somebody's death by a merely negligent act. Okay. Texting while driving, that's negligent. Manslaughter requires a higher degree of negligence called culpable negligence. And manslaughter can't be a justifiable or excusable homicide. The judge will talk to you a little bit about that. This is not a justifiable or excusable homicide. And there is no legal basis at all to find that there was. But culpable negligence, it's a mouthful. Okay? I'm not going to read it all to you. Suffice to say, it's gross and flagrant negligence done with disregard for the safety and welfare of the public. Shooting into the crowd fits the bill. Okay. So if you don't believe second-degree murder has been proven, you can find that they have committed manslaughter. That is up to you all. And if you do, the interrogatories are a little bit different. Instead of the carrier use, possession, discharge interrogatories where you can check all that apply, here you would check only one. Whether the state proved that they personally carried or used a firearm, or if the state did not prove they carried or used a firearm. Those are your options when you're deliberating on manslaughter. Okay. Now, attempted second-degree murder. Move through this a little bit quicker now that we're a little bit more familiar with the terms. Attempted second-degree murder, here's going to be your verdict form. Now, this second interrogatory here, where discharge a firearm and in doing so cause great bodily harm, that will only be given for Nathaniel and Danielle Kendrick as to Mr. Barrow. As Mr. Kendrick testified that Laquan Barrow is the one who shot him. And Danielle Kendrick was sitting behind him, and she told you that the projectile that entered into and passed through her brother ended up in her lodge near her spine. So, you still have the personally carrier use. You're going to have discharge and great bodily harm for Nathaniel and Danielle. And you're going to have just regular discharge and possession for the remaining victims. Now, the verdict form. Guilty of attempted second-degree murder, attempted manslaughter, and not guilty. Attempted second-degree murder is intentionally committing an act like firing into a crowd that could have resulted in the death of or would have resulted in the death of the victim, except that the defendant did not kill the victim. Okay? Meaning, you shoot into the crowd of people. It could have killed that person, but it just didn't kill that person. You know, maybe instead of being hit on the right side of the chest, Mr. Kendrick had been hit on the left. Maybe that killed him. Maybe instead of the bullet, going into Danielle Kendrick's chest and lodging near her spine, it goes a little higher. It lodges itself in her head. Instead of Tomia Wadley being shot in the leg, or Davinis Blunt being shot in the leg, maybe they had tripped and fallen. And maybe the bullet had entered them and killed them. Instead of Dontarius Bartley being shot in the abdomen and being able to be rushed to surgery, maybe Dontarius Bartley sustained, like Benitria did. Maybe one of his arteries was severed. Maybe Dontarius Bartley bled out there at the scene. Okay. The act of shooting into the crowd where those individuals were very well could have killed them, would have killed them, except that just by some stroke of luck or miracle, it didn't. And was the act imminently dangerous to another and done without regard to human life? We've talked about that. No need to kind of beat a dead horse, so to speak. Attempted manslaughter, much the same, intentionally committed the act that could have killed somebody but didn't. Culpable negligence instruction, negligence will apply. There's that differentiation. Now on the verdict form, you have your options here. Guilty of attempted second-degree murder, guilty of attempted manslaughter, or not guilty. And those, ladies and gentlemen, will be your options. Now, again, on the interrogatories here, whether the state proved beyond a reasonable doubt that Mr. Barrow, this one here, that will only apply again to Laquan Barrow. Okay? Now, I've used the term reasonable doubt as I've been up here talking. The judge will tell you what reasonable doubt was. I'm sure you all don't remember with a day of jury selection each what he told you about reasonable doubt. But we talked with you all a little bit about it. And the judge will tell you reasonable doubt is not a mere possible doubt, a speculative, imaginary, or forced doubt. Such a doubt, a possible doubt, a speculative, imaginary, forced doubt, should not return you, or should not cause you to return a verdict of not guilty in a case. It has to be a doubt which is reasonable. Now, the only way to know something happened for sure is to be there and see it with your own two eyes. None of you were there that night, or you would not have been jurors in this case sitting in one of these chairs for the last week and a half. You would have been a witness sitting in this chair here. You get to hear from those people. You get to hear from the people who were there. You get to listen to them, hear what they have to say, judge their credibility. Now, I want to talk to you all a little bit about a timeline, because you've got some videos in this case, and it's important to understand how they sync up with each other. And I'm specifically going to go over with you the video taken from Melissa Hall's cell phone, the first one, the one that's clear, not quite as grainy, where the audio is a little bit better, and the camera that's over the door. And I will tell you, as I'm going to show, 2.5 minutes will pass between the end of Melissa Hall's video, the point of the video when Laquan Barrow and Michael Smith and Kiera Scott, they're all walking now south toward that white pickup truck, the one that was in the VIP parking spot. 2.5 minutes pass between that point and the time that the shots begin to fire. There's a little excerpt from that video. Now, there are going to be 2 timestamps on here, and you remember Adam Dawkins told you about how they work. The one up top, obviously January 1st, 2000, this didn't happen then, okay? It's an older DVR system. We heard that it failed after this stuff was all downloaded. But January 1st of 2000, that was not the day, it was not 6:44 in the morning, okay? But Adam Dawkins told me that timestamp up there, that just runs continuously. It goes forward, even if the video is being rewound. Now, the video was recorded by a detective because they couldn't get it to burn. You heard from Detective Dodd, who his job is doing, and now it's corporate security, but when he worked at the sheriff's office, he did computer forensic. He did internet crimes against children. He is familiar with extracting information from electronic devices. He could not get that thing downloaded. Okay? So he did what he could do in order to make a video of it, which is what Melissa Hall did, whip out a cell phone and start filming it. And you'll see there are times when the person playing the video, Mr. Dawkins, will actually rewind the video. You can see down here in the bottom right corner, it'll say that it's rewinding, but the timestamp up top is going forward. But the timestamp on the bottom will move back. There are also times it's being fast forwarded that you will see it's fast forward times 4. 4 seconds are passing at a clip. So it's the bottom timestamp here that's actually consistent in terms of matching up to, while not the exact date and time, you're able to use that as kind of a constant to figure out how much time passes between certain events. So, again, 9:28:18, 19:20, there's Michael at the door. Now watch him walk away. You're going to see a lady in white over here walk by. Right, 9:28:30, okay? 33, 34. Now a crowd of people comes up to the side of her. There's Michael Smith walking away, 9:28:25. Now we go to Melissa Hall's video. 59 seconds in, you can see him there. Michael Smith walking away. 59 seconds in. Split second, there he is. Now here, 9:28:30. A couple seconds later, there's the lady in white now. She's walked from here over to here. Melissa Hall's video. There she is. You can see her through that sea of people. 9:28:35. Now you see the lady in white right there. You barely see her because now a whole group of people has now passed by her. Okay? That's part of the crowd that is going to include Mr. Barrow. In Hall's video, now you can see the lady in white right here. Guy to her right, now the crowd's beginning to pass by her. So what you can say is that on the door camera, this approximate time, 9:28:30, is going to correspond to this amount of time on Melissa Hall's video. So about a minute in, minute to a minute 5, give or take. Now, here's the door video again. This is at 9:30:09 on the camera. You see down there on the bottom, 9:30:09? And you got that fellow there. He stands out because he's wearing a collared shirt and hat. You got the man in the hat and the collared shirt there. Now, Melissa Hall's video, there you have him, walking out. There he is. There he is again, at 2:38. So it's going to be about a minute and 30 seconds or so between each of those. Okay, now you've got point A and point B on each of the videos. You can sync them up and figure out how much, where exactly, how do you line these videos up? So, Melissa Hall's video, we know, is 3 minutes and 31 seconds long. That's where they've all walked down now. Now they're going to be by that VIP truck. Now Melissa Hall's video, we know, stops at 3 minutes and 31 seconds, which is going to be 53 seconds after the man in the collared shirt is leaving. These times may be off by a second or two, but they're going to be very, very, very close. So we know that Barrow is walking toward the parking lot at 9 minutes, 31 and 2 seconds. It would have been on the door camera. Okay? Now, this is important because we have to gauge the credibility of people like Kiera Scott, Devon Collins, who say that just as they walked away, the shots rang out. These videos show that that is simply not the case. We'll talk about that a little more when we talk about their credibility or lack thereof. So we get the door camera here, 9:33:30. You're going to see this is where people begin running in at the shooting. You see the flashlight coming. That, about 20 seconds later, is going to be Jeff Hall, who ran up the front from the traffic stop, the gentleman you heard from on Friday morning. Take another look. You know it's the shooting. Everyone's looking. What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? Oh, let's run. Let's run. You're going to see Danielle Kendrick fall over here. In a white tank top. Here comes Nate. There he is right there. There's Danielle on the floor. Now people go. They grab her. They drag her inside. So now we know when the shooting is. So we know if the shooting's at 9:33:30 on the door camera, and we know that Barrow would have walked toward the parking lot had that been able to be captured on the camera at 9:31:02, we know that the Melissa Hall video actually ends 2.5 minutes after, where the shooting happens, 2 minutes and 28 seconds, so 2.5 minutes after she stops her video, after the men get by the truck. Now, 2.5 minutes is a long time. It's a long time. We can sit here, we're not going to do it, but we can sit here and watch the second hand on that clock go for 2.5 minutes. That's 10 seconds. 2.5 minutes is doing that 15 times. Now, that's not simply get there, let go, bang, bang, bang. Who's shooting? No, that's enough time to go to cars, to get guns, to stage, to wait. Let's talk about the evidence a little bit now. DNA. You all heard about DNA, you heard about fingerprints. And what you heard is the DNA taken from the shell casings at this scene. They swabbed every single casing. And the attempt to get latent fingerprints from the casings did not yield any evidence of value. And you were explained why by people who are, I would submit to you, experts in their field. You heard from Tiffany Nader from the Sheriff's Office, who explained to you that fingerprints are made up largely of water and fats, which, when there's an explosion inside of a gun that causes a gun to fire, is likely going to just burn off any liquids or fats that are there, and there's likely not going to be any fingerprints. But you try anyway, because you don't know. And you all deserve to hear what was tried by law enforcement to help solve this case. DNA, exact same thing. They tried, but there was, on one casing, there was some information, but not even enough to tell if it was a man or a woman, and not enough to be a value. They tried. Firearms. Let's talk about what the firearms evidence in this case showed. You all spent a fair bit of time hearing from Ms. Draga, who knows her stuff when it comes to guns. I would submit that she also is an expert in the field of firearms identification. We have the easel set up here. Now, easel 11 is not shown, but if you recall, easel 11 is going to be probably right over here. So you have up here easels 7 and 8. Over here, 1, 2, 3, well actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Easel 6 over here, kind of near that second hash mark. And over here, easels 9, 10, and down here, 11. Block our court reporter's view, but I'm told if she can hear me, that's all she needs. So. So we've got the shell casings, and they're going to appear right over here for easels 9, 10, 11. 6 is up there, 1 through 5, 7 and 8 over here. So easels 7 and 8. Ammunition fired from, we'll call it firearm 1. 4 Winchester casings, 9mm. All these shell casings are 9mm. And there are 4 shell casings found there. It's going to be found right in the first parking spot, right up over here. A little sticky note there. 4 at easels 7 to 8. Easels 1 through 5, ammunition from what we will call firearm number 2. 13 casings, federal. Fired from a single gun. We've got that kind of near the repair work there. Keep that there. 13 casings at easels 1 through 5. Now, we know there are little ricochet marks in the sidewalk right over here, going right toward the area that Miss Robinson was in. And right over here, you have 2 bullet holes, 2 holes. Now, Mr. Pastrana told you he doesn't really remember those holes being there. And we can pretty confidently say that one of them wouldn't have been. How can we say that? Because they find jacketing. They find projectile fragments and jacketing inside of the metal. State's Exhibit 33 is what was contained in this little pile. And what we know is that the jacketing that's found here in Exhibit 33 is pulled from this corner here and was fired from that gun. The one that fired the 13 casings, because the jacketing on it matched the projectiles that were removed from Ms. Robbins. Now we have easels 6 through 11, or 6, 9, 10, and 11. Now, easel 6 is going to be a little further up here. You heard about how shell casings can move around. We know a lot of vehicles left that parking lot that day. But you have 3 of them clustered a little more closely together, right up over here. And 4 casings right there, fired from the 3rd gun, also Winchester casings. Now, casings are similar from the same manufacturer, fired from 9mm. You as a jury may conclude that the people who loaded those into the guns got them from a common source. Now you have the photos printed out that you can look at. And you can do what I did here, which is begin to overlay photos to get a feel for how the scene itself is laid out. Because there is no contemporaneous crime scene photo that depicts the entire scene. There's not. But you can overlay photos with one another and you can get an idea of how the club is laid out in the parking lot. And you can see over here, while they appear further away on the overhead diagram than they do in real life, you can actually see here that these are pretty close together, okay? Right there, and right up here, okay? You can tell because this is going to lead out. Where this leads out doesn't even come to where these kind of hash marks are. Where the easels 6, or the 4 casings, or the 3 casings are found at easels 9 to 11. So, you know, we have a couple casings here, right here where the road work was. A few more are going to be right back over here, and a few more right over here. 1, 2, 3. All in very close proximity to each other. And there's a shot, you kind of superimpose one of Kathleen Schmidt's daytime pictures on to get a feel for how these relate to kind of the area where the red carpet was that night, that little brick walkway that leads out toward 441. And remember, Ms. Robinson is found deceased right over here. Immediately, if you're looking at the building to the right of where the pavement was. Let's talk about the gunshot residue test now. And that's what the firearms tell us. Gunshot residue. We know by the time the police were able to they got to Mr. Barrow's house at 8 o'clock in the morning, made contact with an older woman there, appeared to be in her 50s, if not 60s. Ultimately, Mr. Barrow came back. Mr. Barrow went to the sheriff's office, and while there, they collected a gunshot residue kit. They collected it in the left hand at 10:56 and the right hand at 10:57. Now, gunshot residue. It is what it is, okay? No one can say that it's proof somebody fired a gun. No one can say it's proof that Laquan Barrett fired a gun. But the presence of the particle of gunshot residue on his hand is a fact that you all can consider. That long after the shooting, Mr. Barrett still had gunshot residue on his hand. And during cross-examination, there was some talk about whether or not Mr. Barrow may have touched the handles of the doors and been touching stuff in the interview room, okay? What did Detective Miller tell you, Sergeant Miller? He told you that when he brought Mr. Barrow in, he has to, because the sheriff's office is a secure building, as one would expect. Swipe a key card, open the door. Next door, swipe a key card, open the door. If the police are going to be in control in that situation, they are going to be opening doors for people, they're going to sit in an interview room, Okay? Now, so that long after the fact, Mr. Barrow still has a gunshot residue particle on his hand. Okay, it's consistent with having come from gunshot residue. He was asked what his hobbies were. He said football. He doesn't say he's fishing, doesn't say he's hunting. He did say he had not washed his hands since the previous night. Okay? But there's still a particle there. And she told you she does not expect it to be a particle that would have come from something like a fishing weight or something, because the morphology of the particle, it does not indicate that it was kind of broken off. She kind of talked about whether it's like an amorphous shape versus having jagged edges, and she would expect that the shape of this particle indicates it was formed under extremely high heat, like during the explosion caused by discharging a gun. So, gunshot residue is not a smoking gun, but you can still consider it, you should consider it, that that long after the fact, Mr. Barrow still had gunshot residue on his hand. Body cameras. The body cameras give you an idea of how close in time these shots were to one another. And that's important, because it shows that this is not a case where anybody is acting in self-defense. I mean, you have three people firing guns from one place toward one area for one purpose. The close proximity of shots show that these are people who would have known each other, who would have had an opportunity to talk about what they were going to do, to plan it. Doesn't need to be, it's not like the invasion at Normandy on D-Day. It doesn't need to be planned for months. This is something that can be hastily thrown together in the moment, and it was. Let's talk about Melissa Hall's video. I want you all to watch it. We're going to spend some time talking about it. through it again. I'm going to point some things at you, then we're going to go through it with some still shots. Starts off over here. That's Kiara Scott holding Maisha Barrow back in front of Murphy's Oyster Bar. Now Laquan's going to be closer to the door of the club. This is where he comes up. I'm sparing y'all because of Merv. Which I'll slide because of Merv. With that ass. Here it comes. Fuck the police. Now this is where they go back to the front of the club. You're going to see Maisha in here. She's got on white leggings. You're going to see her trying to get in. Kiara Scott, he had his full focus on Laquan Barrow. He knows him. He didn't want him to do something dumb. He wanted him to do something stupid. See Maisha, there she is. Security's keeping her out. In a second, you're going to hear something. It sounds like you're going to need a casket for tonight's nigga. Listen. You hear G. It's Gary. Now you're going to hear I'm going to shoot the shit out of him. Listen. I'm going to shoot the shit out of him. Now here's Kiara holding him back. Now watch. Michael's already been running around. Michael's already went around the side of the building. You can watch this 1,000 times and not see what Michael does. We're going to zone in on it. Now Michael, and I like beer, it's not free beer. But different people will talk about that. They go up, he's straight. He's straight. Let him go. Kiara Scott, despite all of his efforts, and he made efforts that night. And Kiara Scott, I submit to you, the testimony on behalf of his friend was just that, testimony for his friend. It may not have been entirely credible. Kiara Scott tried to prevent this from happening. He did. You can't watch that video and not know that Kiara Scott tried to stop this. He tried to stop his friend from doing something stupid. He tried with everything he had. But it wasn't enough, because Laquan Barrow was determined to shoot the shit out of Nate Kendrick when he walked out of that club. And shoot the shit out of him, he did. So let's talk about Quan's statements. Fuck the police. Fuck the police. That is indicative of what Laquan Barrow is thinking about. What kind of is tumbling around in that brain of his at that point in time. He doesn't care about the legal consequences of what he's going to do. He's just going to do it. Shoot the shit out of him. That's as he's getting back up the door wanting Nate to come back out. Michael's already tried to get in the club at that point and been turned away. See, because here's the man in the green shirt walking away, right? So we know Michael was up there about a minute before or so, for a little bit, trying to get back in the club. He kept having to be pushed back by security. And then as they begin walking away, Laquan Barrow again, He doesn't care about the consequences of what he does because he has bond money. Fuck, man, I got bond money. And that's what Laquan Barrow is saying as he's being walked away toward the VIP car. Let's talk about our witnesses, okay? When you're considering the testimony of witnesses, you have to consider their credibility, okay? First thing, probably the most important thing, is did they have an opportunity to see and know the things about which they testify? If we called somebody who, as a witness, who the defense could prove was in Europe at the time, but they wanted to testify about what happened that night, clearly, right, you don't give their testimony away because they were not there, they did not have the opportunity to see and know the things about which they testified. So ask yourself, as you're going through all the witnesses, well, were they in a position to see and know the things that they told us, to identify these men, to talk about what the men said out front? Did they have an interest in how the case should be decided? Javon Collins, Kiera Scott, and Herbert Welcome, they're all very good friends with these guys. I believe Kiera Scott is family to Mr. Barrow and Mr. King. Javon Collins has been friends with them for a long time. And Mr. Collins comes in and he tries to minimize their friendship in front of you. They're okay friends. They're okay friends. They're more than okay friends. They're good friends. And there is a difference there. And that's important. Because the level of their friendship is very important for you to consider when judging their credibility. These people don't want to see their friends get in trouble for this. Okay? They just don't. People don't want to see their friends get in trouble. Mr. Collins, he has an interest in how this case is going to be decided. Herbert Welcome, Gary is his very best friend, his best friend. Not a lot of people have best friends past the age of 10 or so. But he's got one. It's Gary. Him and Gary are best friends. Okay? And they're all friends with these guys. They all hang out together, except Mr. Scott and Mr. Smith. They just see each other at parties. The rest of them, they hang out, they play cards, that kind of thing. Does your testimony agree with other testimony and evidence in this case? Look at the other evidence, okay? A lot of people say they hear or they see 3 shooters. Okay? Mr. Kendrick, Mr. Shaw, 3 shooters. How many guns? 3 guns. People describe the location of gunfire, where people were approximately. Other evidence, because you can look at the testimony of other people to gauge the credibility of a different person, okay? That's going to be important when we talk about Dontarius Bartley here in a minute. At some point, did they make a statement inconsistent with the testimony he or she gave in court? And more important than that, it's what is the root of the inconsistency? And we'll talk about that. I'll probably talk about it a little bit more in the rebuttal argument about why the inconsistencies, because they are there. We talked about it after jury selection, that there are going to be inconsistent statements by people, that they're going to remember things differently on different occasions, that the type of questioning they have, like whether Mr. Kendrick has just come out of a coma and has asked the question, hey, was there anybody else who shot? Hey, what kind of gun did they have in one breath? And he responds to the attempting to describe the gun. He doesn't get to the rest of the question. And they continue on in the interview. They then say, he's not, we need to leave. He's, we'll come back, try to get him when he's better. And then Mr. Kendrick talked about how the interest in how the case is going to be decided. Mr. Kendrick, it's not like him to do what he did. That's what he told you. Nate believes in the code. What is the code? No snitching. It ain't like Nate for 20 somebody out. But he did. And he didn't do it for himself. And that's an important thing to know when thinking about Mr. Kendrick's testimony. Why did he do it? Because he knows if he had gotten in a fight that night with Laquan Barrow, Benicia Robinson would still be alive. And he said his life is full of guilt. And the best thing he can do is to come in and tell the truth about what happened. It's only the truth about what happened will begin to set things right inside of Mr. Kendrick. Have they been convicted of a felony or misdemeanor involving dishonesty or false statement? You heard Dee Webster. She's been convicted of 2 felonies and 3 misdemeanors involving dishonesty, theft, convictions. How much weight do you give that when weighing somebody's testimony? That's up for you all to decide. But I'd submit to you, whether it's Mr. Welcome with his 9 felony convictions, or Ms. Kendrick with 2 felonies and a couple misdemeanor theft convictions, the criminal histories of these individuals really, in the grand scheme of things, should be afforded slight weight. Of course, you have to consider it, but give it its proper place, give it its proper due. And whether the state's met its burden of proof depends upon the nature and quality of the evidence presented. And you should always consider how the witnesses acted as well as what they said. Right? What they say we can get out of a transcript. How they act only comes one place, live and in person. And in person is important in a jury trial because when you're in a room with somebody, you can get a much different feel for them than you can outside or through watching somebody on television. You know, people give off, I've heard hippies use the term like vibe, right? But people have a vibe they give off. Everyone kind of understands that. So being in a room with these guys, people are going to recognize things. Maybe it's just the way they move, something about them that they're going to be able to recognize. Now, there's been a lot of talk about the scene being chaotic. And once Detective Tuck gets there, his in-car camera's going, it's a pretty wild thing. I mean, I think one of the witnesses referred to it as like a mass casualty situation, unlike anything they'd ever been to before. A good thing, but it's chaotic. And yes, that has some place in this trial. The fact that people could have got away, that shell casings were bumped and rolled around a little bit, it plays some role there. But the scene is not as chaotic as those body cameras and in-car videos make it appear to be at first blush. When you look at the door camera, look at how, there are people out there, but not a ton of people run in. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Danielle's on the floor, 14, 15. Dozen and a half people outside at that point. You run inside. There's nowhere else to take cover. You got Davinus, Tamia's friend, Benitria, Jarrell Shaw. Right, there's Officer Hall. Officer Hall's up there now. See his flashlight. This is his body camera when he gets there. Officer Hall is there 20 seconds later. And this is what it's like outside. This is not the bedlam and chaos and screaming and hysteria you see a minute or two after this. You've got Mr. Blunt right here crawling. Benitria, where she fell. A few people here. Somebody over there by McDonald's. And then this is Hall. This is Jeff Hall's body camera when he is approaching Benitria. Okay? You got somebody attending to her. Woman in a red dress. And you got this woman here. This dress here, walking away. Midriff showing. Heels. Scary and Hamilton. Right? She was not tugging on Laquan Bauer's arm. Let's go, let's go, let's go. She went over to see what her man did. Take a look at his handiwork. She didn't stop there, stoop down, and see if she was okay. She looked, sauntered away. There she goes. There she is again. There's Javano Collins. He comes up, he takes a look too. He goes away. Now there's his shoes. Shorts, shirt. Now Javano tells you, I go right back inside. I go right in front. But that's not true either. Because Dontarius Bartley, Jeffrey Hall goes up to, is on the side of the building. Now, what we know now, as Jeffrey Hall runs past, he's going to see Tamia Wadley. Tamia's going to be up over here, kind of off the board a little bit. Davinus Blunt, he passes right there. Benitria Robinson, Demetria's right here. And when you go back and look, you got that VIP truck. Parked right over here. That spot. Melissa Hall told you, right, that she's over by Benitria when the shots happened. Kind of standing where she, under the little light pole where she was standing. There's Javano. Jeff Hall goes around the side of the building. What does he see, right? Well, he doesn't see. I think Ms. Hawthorne was asking the witnesses. But your body cameras, they just see what they see. They capture what they capture, right? Right. And what does he see right there? Chevy truck, a couple spots back from 441. Remember Kira Scott said, I don't remember seeing any police. Right? Well, there's Jeff Hall. So we've got right up over here, Quan Barrow's truck. Okay? Now next to the truck, you can see back to the car in the following row. So you know that the car that was parked there has already left the scene. What car is that? That's going to be Gary King's Kia. That's already gone. So now you've got these casings right up over here, kind of between Barrow's truck and King's Kia. You're going to see here, right here, Herbert Welcome, in the back of the building. Watch, he gets in with his black shirt, orange shorts. He's running around the side as Rodriguez comes up. In his tank top.
I got you. Where the shots come from? Are they in the club?
He's going up there. What do you take a look at that right there in the foreground? You know what that is? So he's going up. That's the truck that Jeffrey Hall saw the lights on. That's Kira Scott's truck. And watch Rodriguez. Going up, there it is. Walking right by the driver's door. A police officer in uniform walks right by his door, but Kira Scott doesn't see any police officers that night. And there's the truck again. Okay? And you can see here, there's a dark vehicle and a light vehicle right over here between Barrow's truck and Kia. We should probably all be moved down to here. There's the truck again, and again, and there's Dontarius Bartley. Dontarius Bartley is right over here, by the corner of the building. He's been shot as he was walking off. There's Dontarius on the ground. Now, Javon Collins didn't go back inside. How do we know that? Javon Collins went up by Dontarius Bartley, as Jeff Hall was talking to him. So, Javon Collins is probably looking around for Nate Kendrick, wondering if they got Nate. That's why he goes inside, see what his friends got there. BXQX50, the Kia. Keona Roach sees the men milling about the Kia. There it is. Jarrell Shaw describes it differently on different occasions. This is a black Malibu, respected Dodge. Kia is a Malibu, it's a similar body shape. This is a Mazda. What he's consistent about is that it's a four-door black sedan. In the moment, Mr. Shaw can be forgiven for not getting the make and model right. Keona Oates got the tag. And because they got the tag, the police got the Kia. They go to Laquan Barrow's house trying to find it. It's registered to Gary's mother. When they go to 9324 Spring Terrace, a group of women show up. They're trying to ascertain the location of the Kia. Denisha May says, I was at this house all night. Let me show you on my phone where I was. Well, Keith Miller, and All it takes is noticing, oh, there's the GPS pin. I wonder if that's where the Kia is. So he sends Detective Dodd to around Northeast 36th Avenue and Northeast 20th Street, has him go to an apartment. They go and they find the Kia, parked in spot 2714. And they go to the door. Who comes out of apartment 2714? Gary King. Gary King comes out of that apartment. Gary King drives that Kia. Oh, look, there's his ID. All right, so we know Gary King was in that Kia. And importantly, we know he was in the Kia after he'd been in the nightclub. Because the fact that his ID is in the Kia means that he put it in there, right? He had to have his ID to get in the club. You heard from Wayne Council, everybody shows ID to get in the club because they got a ban check. Hey, Gary King, he's under the age of 21, so they're definitely going to ban him, put a ban on him. So Gary King, after being in that nightclub, ends up in this Kia at some point in time. You hear they all regroup at Laquan's grandmother's house, and then they kind of all go their separate ways. Joshua Rainey, China White, Bird. There he is. He was there that night. We know he was inside. He was a Virgo, so he got in free. There's his birthday, right? 9/8 of 88. And you all are Septembers, you know, September's a Virgo month. Joshua Rainey was there that night. He was in the club. Which means that Joshua Rainey and Gary King were together in that, or they were together in that car sometime later. They were both in that car at some point later. And why is that important? It's important because of what Keoner Oates sees that night. Keoner Oates sees. Now remember, they come out of the club. You got about 5 minutes or so after they come out until that shooting happens. Their IDs both are going to get into that car. And Keoner Oates sees them around the car. And Lateria Blocker, who goes out the back, sees a truck leave. And she knows these guys. You know, do the witnesses have an opportunity in the eyewitness identification section, the judge will talk to you about, are they familiar with the subjects involved? You all would have a much easier time spotting me in a grocery store today than you would have if you had been dismissed during the first jury selection panel, right? You got to see me more. You got to observe me more. She knows Gary King and Laquan Barrow. She used to live out there. She used to hang out in the shores. And Gary King, I think she said it's like her cousin has a baby by him. She knows him. And what does she see? She sees as they're driving away, them give like a dap or a high five to each other. So either like, or whatever it is. And there was some cross-examination, I think, by Mr. Bankiewicz over, well, was it a high five or was it a dap? Is there really a difference? Is there a difference? There is a big difference. But you remember Mr. Welcome when he came in here? So he was kind of a funny guy, showing his teeth and all that. He was kind of likable. But Mr. Welcome, he, during his testimony, discussed high five or dapping. And he actually said, in response to a question, we gave each other a dap or a high five, or five, or something. But even Mr. Welcome, a witness Mr. Bankiewicz calls, equates the two. It's a greeting, a celebratory thing. Okay? Laquan and Gary they just thought they took care of Mr. Kendrick and shot him. How would they have known that? They would have known that because Javon Collins went out and let them know that they got him. So as they're leaving, they high-five, they dap, and they're in the truck together. Okay? Now, Melissa Hall. Let's talk about her a little bit. She identifies Michael Smith as giving a gun to Mr. Barrow and says she believes Michael Smith was wearing a free beer shirt. The shirt she sees somebody wearing is I like beer. It's not free beer. And it's not Michael Smith. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit because you're going to have these little inconsistencies you have to sort through. So this is one of them where when you sort through it, there's a perfectly reasonable explanation for why she sees this. There's Michael. There's free, I like beer. Goes up to Michael. You see that? Goes up to Michael along with Javon Collins. So there's Michael right there in the video. Here's Kira Scott holding back Maisha. Now this is important again for assessing Kira Scott's testimony. I don't see Michael Smith at all that night. Well, Michael Smith is there. He's on top of Kiera at several points in time. There's Michael again. There's Kiera again. Right there. See the hat? That's I Like Beer. There's Michael again. Kiera again. Now, what you see here is I Like Beer, Javon Collins, and Michael Smith's going to be right here in the foreground. They're walking up to Michael. There they are. Getting closer. Javon reaches his hand out. They're close enough to hand something off at that point if they wanted to. I Like Beer is there. There they go. And Michael runs out of the frame. Where does he go? I Like Beer leaves too. Now, they're different people. But what they do is they both go around the side of the building. Watch again. That's Melissa Hall watching. Next, this is about 40 seconds later or so. Melissa's going to pan to the right. You're get a casket for a knife, and you're going to shoot shit out of them. Barely notice him coming around the corner. But he runs up now to Laquan. Amen, he's straight. That's Michael. Let him go. There he is, right on the side of the building there, coming out. A little clearer. And he's went around the side of the building for something. Out he comes. There he is again. Now. This is going to be where Mr. Barrow, who's up by the road. Let's see. That's from the other video that was on Melissa Hall's phone, showing the exact same thing. The footage is greater, but you actually see and hear Michael better in that video. He's straight, let him go. He's straight, let him go. Okay. So now they have a plan. Now Raquan's going to be able to take care of what he needs to take care of. Michael runs up, and when you watch Free Beer, I Like Beer. Watch him. There's Michael, goes up. Look at him. How close is he to Kiera Scott there? But Kiera doesn't remember seeing him, right? Okay. There they are again. There's Laquan in the crowd there. Kiera holding him. Here comes Free Beer. Now, Free Beer's got something here. Watch his hands. He walks up, goes into that crowd. And there they go together. Members of the jury, you've heard from a lot of people during this trial. Jarrell Shaw identifies all three of these men as having been involved in this shooting. Jarrell Shaw is somebody who does not have an interest in how this case is going to be decided at all. Okay? Mr. Shaw is the man, you will recall, who keeps a picture of Ms. Robinson, or probably has a picture of her on his phone, because he wants to remember her as beautiful, not like you saw her that night. Mr. Shaw does see her that night. You can see the still shots from Jeffrey Hall's body cam. What Mr. Shaw sees what he sees. Mr. Shaw has walked now between vehicles. Mr. Shaw is going to be here. Mr. Shaw is going to be the one who's going to have the best view of the person in the middle here, who fired off 13 rounds, federal cartridges, the same type of cartridge found in the corner of the building, the same type of projectiles consistent with having been manufactured by federal, type found in Benitria Robinson. And he sees Michael Smith, identifies Michael Smith. That he raised that gun up. He looked at him as he walked past. He looked like he had put on a dark hoodie. They got 2.5 minutes. Michael Smith put on something. Michael Smith, I submit to you, would put on something. He's about to do this in the parking lot. But he, given it some thought, that would make it more difficult to see him. Michael Smith, the little fro, like you all got to see in the photographic lineup, the fro Mr. Smith has. When you see Mr. Shaw, identify him. Mr. Shaw says, as he walks by, the guy just says, "Better move, bro." And Jarrell was like, "What?" And then he looks, and he's got a gun. And he turns around like, "Oh." And then he just, up, boom, 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 begins firing every shot he had. As he's firing, Jarrell's able to look over here and see the person over here, who he describes as Gary King. Short guy with golds in his mouth. He recognizes, he sees Mr. King, describes Mr. King, identifies Mr. King in the lineup that night. Over here, he tells you the person he saw shooting over here was Laquan Barrow. That's the only thing Mr. Shaw's really been inconsistent about whether he saw him with a gun or not. He says he sat down and thought about it. He had a gun. He was shooting. How much you weigh that inconsistency, again, is up to you. Jarrell Shaw is Michael Smith there, firing off 13 rounds. We've got Gary King and Laquan Barrow, each in a position to fire 4. Mr. Shaw, we talked about evidence, witnesses, it's quality, not quantity. Mr. Shaw, he's not from here. He moved up to Ocala for a slower way of life, does maintenance type work, went out that night just to watch a fight, goes to the wing house, there's a fight. He's going to kind of move with the crowd, goes to Cloud 9, hoping to get inside, milling around, sees Mr. Barrow. He describes him in the photo line as one of the main reasons this happened this night. How could you not have your attention drawn to Mr. Barrow watching that video? People there in real life would have had their attention drawn to Mr. Barrow. Mr. Shaw does. But once the gunfire begins, his attention's on the man who just passed. The man with tunnel vision, the man looking dead ahead. Right there, Michael Smith staring at Nate Kendrick, the man he's about to shoot. Crowd of people that he's going to fire a gun at. Mr. Shaw says he'll never forget his face. Just like Nate Kendrick won't forget the faces of the men who tried to kill him. Then you got Arthur Burney. We'll hit the rewind button now. You remember Arthur Burney, blue shirt, yellow tie? Medically retired from the Air Force, served abroad in Iraq, Afghanistan, Djibouti, and Korea. Works for the Department of Defense, has held top secret security clearance from Ocala, back in Ocala. He knows these guys. He's had Maisha Barrow over to his house on 2 occasions. Okay? He knows who these guys are. He's familiar with them. And that night, Mr. Burney, he knows something's about to happen. He's no stranger. Firefights. He's talked to you about seeing people who have been wounded in way of injury. And he knows what's going to happen. Just feeling in his bones. As he starts going away, what does he see? Laquan Barrow. Raise up the gun. Boom, 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 boom. He sees Laquan. Laquan, we're putting over here, this area here. So you've got Arthur Burney. Arthur Burney identifies Laquan Barrow. If the only witness we called as to Mr. Smith and Mr. King was Jarrell Shaw, The only witness we called as Mr. Barrow was Mr. Bernie, and you believe them? Had no reasonable doubt? That's more than enough evidence to convict. But we have more evidence. We've spent a lot of time talking about the video because the video gives you a snapshot into what happened right before. Okay? Gives you an idea of what these people were doing, what they were thinking, how they were acting. Ebony Yeomans, Nathaniel Kendrick. He identifies all three of the guys as having shot him. Nate's going to be over here along with Danielle and Ebony Yeomans. Ebony sees who she describes as Michael Smith. So I put you over here by the casings. Ebony describes seeing Michael Smith shooting with Juan Barrow shooting. Gary King. She's not going to see this. Gary King's going to be over here, more behind this light-colored view. Right? So the fact that she doesn't see Gary King, that's to be expected. There was some cross-examination. Well, Ms. Yeomans, don't you just want to see these guys get in trouble? Your Danielle's a good friend. Well, if she wanted to come in here and lie, how easy would it have been for her to say, oh, Mr. King too? Well, right, but she doesn't. And she's actually shown a lot of Mr. King is not making identification. Okay? Because she doesn't see him. And when you're looking at whether people have the opportunity to see or know the things about which they testified, did they not have the opportunity to not see and know the things about which they did not testify? In this case, Ms. Yeomans would not have had the opportunity to see Mr. King, given his location relative to everything. The white VIP truck, the light-colored vehicle, he would have been up there. But she's able to see Mr. Barrow, she's able to see Mr. Smith. Now, with Danielle, sees the Juan Barrow. Juan Barrow shot her. And when Danielle, and when Nate testified, the one discrepancy between him and Mr. Shaw is whether Smith or King was right over here. He's got them juxtaposed. Okay. Now, how you sort out that conflict, the evidence is up to you all. But I would submit to you, I don't know if we talked about it in the jury selection, but somebody says a car, the white car goes through the red light, another person says no, the black car went through the red light. Right? Two people, they say two different things. How do you sort out that conflict? The first step is know your issue. Is the issue what car ran the red light? Whether those two cars had a collision. This is not a case about who stood where. Nobody, although I believe the credible evidence would suggest Mr. Smith was standing at the easel and fired 13 rounds. In all likelihood is the one who fired the shot, the fatal shots that killed Ms. Robinson. You don't have that interrogatory on your verdict form for Mr. Smith, or Mr. Barrow, or Mr. King as to who actually personally discharged the firearm and caused that. That's not an issue for you to consider. So we don't have a who ran the red light situation we have here. We have, was there a car accident? Did these men shoot? Who did shoot? D.D. Webster. Crouching behind the truck with Cuner Oates. D.D. Webster would have seen Laquan Barrow. See over the front of the truck, you're knowing about the truck, right? She didn't take cover initially, then she did. They're in a position to see Mr. Barrow. Dontarius Bartley, let's talk about Dontarius Bartley. Dontarius Bartley, 3-4 days after this happened, is in the hospital. Detective Newbanks goes up there, gets a statement from him, asks him, can you identify somebody in a photographic lineup? Has a photographic lineup. Shows Mr. Bartley the lineup. Mr. Bartley identifies that Juan Barrow is the one who shot him. Now Mr. Bartley comes into court and says, well, maybe it was Laquan Barrow, I don't know, I'm just telling you what they want me to hear, da-da-da-da. All right, well, how do you know when he's telling the truth? He's telling the truth on September 17th, 2015, or on November 30th of 2017. He was telling the truth back then. Here's how you know. Mr. Bartley, when he's asked, well, what do you mean they threatened me? Or what do you mean that they made you do it? What did they do? Well, they asked me questions. Then you have to ask, well, why did Mr. Bartley select Laquan Barrow? Right, at random, it's a 1 out of 6 chance, so about 16 2/3% likelihood that he would randomly select Laquan Barrow. So ask him, well, what is the reason you selected Mr. Barrow? Well, I saw him on the news. That's why we asked about that. Tell us about the news program. I was laying in my hospital bed. They said there was a shooting, that he had been arrested for it. I picked him out. Oh, because he was arrested already? Laquan Barrow had not been arrested already. Laquan Barrow was not arrested for another 4 days. Don Terry's partly his whole reason for selecting that photo is not true. Nathaniel Kendrick told you he's abided by the code. It's not like him to come in here and point somebody out. But he's not like Mr. Bartley either. On September 17th of 2015, you all can consider that. And as you're considering it, ask yourself, here's Don Terry's Bartley, who's going to be right in front of where Nate and Danielle are standing. He's in a position to see Mr. Barrow. He's in a position to know who shot him. And he identifies it. And he can't explain to you what this threat is that's made. And his whole reason for picking him is completely false. Mr. Bartley identified the man who shot him. Then you got Wayne Counsel. Mr. Counsel says he runs and ducks around this corner here. What does he see? Mr. Barrow. Mr. Counsel is focused on Laquan Barrow. He's told you Laquan was a problem inside. He had to put him in a chokehold, kind of lift him up, choke him out, get him outside. As he did, he sees Laquan Barrow. And in here you got materia blush. Right place, right time. Happens to go outside, happens to catch that tag as it goes away. We've talked about Melissa Hall. Let's talk about Giovanni Collins. You know, that there's a proverb that if you build your house upon a foundation of sand, the house is not going to be a strong house. Everyone's probably heard that before. You have to look at when people claim that they saw or know something, ask yourself how it is that they know that thing. So Giovanni Collins, how does he know that Laquan Barrow didn't have a gun? Well, he says, I saw him hold his hands up. It's a convenient observation, right? Okay. He says that Laquan was being held onto right out front until when this happened. The video from Melissa Hall disproves that. It's at least 2.5 minutes after they begin to walk away toward the parking lot, that shooting happens. He says he doesn't see Michael Smith that night. He doesn't even want to put Michael as being there. But we know they were together because they went up and it looks like they shake hands or they hand something to one another. You can't really tell. It's dark. It's a cell phone video. But they definitely interacted. They were definitely there together, and Giovanni Collins definitely knew he was there. He's good friends with these guys. Okay, he's talked to both Laquan and Barry, but when they've talked, they've never happened to talk about this case, never talked about what happened that night. That in and of itself is not believable. If he doesn't want to tell you that they talked about it, why? Because I submit to you what they talked about was how to cook up testimony that he can then come in here and serve to you. He testifies that he wanted to give a statement, but I was turned away. Okay. Maybe that happened, right? But let's ask him about it. Let's find out a little more detail. He tells you he got there, he's outside, Shigarian's there, they go inside, him and Shigarian sit together in a room, they don't leave the room together until they're told, what color are you wearing? Blue shirt? Get on out of here. We don't need to talk to you. That in and of itself is just simply not believable. Just on its face, it's not believable. But it's also not believable because he says he was with Shigarian the entire time. You heard from Lieutenant Voracek, who told you, no, Shigarian was in an interview room for about 1 hour and 40 minutes. And subject to interrogation. Without Mr. Collins there. So that means one of two things. One is that Mr. Collins either was there and just didn't tell the police he wanted to make a statement, or that he wasn't there at all but now wants to say that he was to explain why it took him close to 2 years to claim to be a witness to Laquan Barrow going, who's shooting? Kira Scott, Laquan's cousin. Again, he doesn't want to put Michael Smith there either. Right? Nobody wants to put Michael at that scene. Right? And he says, I'm holding on to Laquan until 10 seconds, couldn't have been less than 10 seconds before the shots rang out. Now, Kiera Scott doesn't want to, he gets testy when I cross-examine him and ask him about the timeline. Starts saying, I was making him answer a certain way, but you got to hear the exact questions that were asked. Was it more than 10 seconds? No. We counted to 10. And so was it less than 10 seconds? Yeah. Okay, Mr. Scott doesn't want to admit the timeline because timelines pin people down. Okay, when he says 10 seconds, that's not a minute, that's not 2 minutes, that's not 2.5 minutes. And that's why we count with people, 1001, 1002, 1003. So people get a full feel for kind of the sweep of time and how long time can actually take to pass when you're paying attention to it. He says he doesn't see Michael at all. The video disproves this. He says Shigarian was right next to Quan after the shooting, telling him to go, 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 and pulling on him. Well, you got Herbert Welcome putting Laquan over there by all the vehicles, right? And you got Shigarian, after the shooting, 20 seconds later, having walked up to Benitria, just walking away. She was not in a rush to leave that day. She was taking her time getting out of there. Kiera Scott's not straightforward about that. He's not straightforward when he answers questions. He says they didn't stay. They didn't see police. They didn't see police cars. The body cameras disprove this. Officer Hall captures that car on camera, and he's got a flashlight. He's talking to people who have been shot. You can't tell me Kiera Scott, facing Dontarius Bartley, has not taken notice that there's a man shot in the car. David Rodriguez walks almost right by his driver's window. Had Detective Rodriguez known that was the truck, he could have reached in and touched Kiera Scott if that window had been down. He was that close. But Kiera Scott, he's got to come up for a reason why they don't stay. If there was nothing wrong, if they didn't do anything wrong, why are they leaving? Yeah, sure, maybe it's that they're scared like a lot of other people. Maybe it's something a little bit more sinister than that. And the fact that he says that they left and didn't see any police shows that he's trying to be deceptive about their motivation for leaving. There are police cars, there are lights, there are sirens. You cannot help but notice that if you're at the nightclub that night. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I thank you for your attention. I will have an opportunity to get up again.
All right, we'll talk about that in a moment. You complete. Mr. McCourt, you can finish.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you all will have the opportunity to hear from the defense, listen carefully to what they have to say, you'll hear from me again a little bit later. When you all deliberate your verdict at the end of this trial, I'm confident the group of you in the back will find Gary King guilty of second-degree murder, discharging a firearm, possessing a firearm, carrying or using a firearm, and 4 counts of attempted murder. And I'm confident that you all, the jury for Mr. Smith and Mr. Barrow, will also find those 2 men guilty of murder, possessing firearms, using and discharging them, and 5 counts of attempted murder. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we've reached a good point for the mid-morning break, so please close your pads. Remember again, it is not time to begin discussing the case, and we'll be back with you in 15 or 20 minutes.